Who will be the better dynasty running back between Trey Benson and Jonathon Brooks? Both of these guys are highlighting an already weak running back class, and both of them have definite positives about their landing spots. But both of them at the same time have definite weaknesses about those landing spots as well. Because on one hand, you've got Trey Benson, Breece Hall level athletic measurables and a solid landing spot, but never as productive as his athletic and physical profile should suggest. And on the other hand, you've got Jonathon Brooks. This guy broke out in his only year without Bijan Robinson stealing headlights at Texas, but tore his ACL in November, and he's got a very weak team around him in Carolina. Some people think this is a really clear and obvious choice. To others, it's a very close one. So we're going through who's got the most dynasty upside in this video. But of course, this is a new channel exclusively for Dynasty. So please go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support if you get value from this video today. So let's go ahead and discuss Trey Benson first and foremost right here. Now, this is not as well done as the wide receiver videos where I have a wide receiver prospect model that I fully trust 100%. I do have certain things that I'm looking for at the running back position when it comes to prospects out of college, but this is by no means as accurate, and I will not claim it to be as accurate at the running back position. I do feel good about some of these traits though, so I'm going to walk you through what I am looking for at the running back position in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So the first thing I'm looking for is going to be the size. The size metric is going to determine how likely a player will be to handle a 3-down workload. And for example, this thing matters. Size matters at the running back position more so than it matters at wide receiver. Because you look back to guys like Jamal Charles, right? Jamal Charles did handle a 3-down workload for a few seasons, but he was always plagued by injury. So his size, being below 200 pounds, was a problem for Jamal Charles. Now looking at the modern day with a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, who is a fantastic player. We all love Jahmyr Gibbs, but at the same time, he is underneath 200 pounds, right around that 200 pounds area, but he's 5'9", and he does not look like he's going to be handling a full workload for when it comes to being a 3-down back for Detroit. They have David Montgomery taking away touches. So this size metric will determine if it's even possible for them to handle a 3-down workload. And Trey Benson has that size. He's got 6 foot, 216 pound size that will make him at least likely to be able to handle a 3-down workload if he is at all good at the NFL level. Now, the next thing I'm looking at is the speed metric. The speed metric when it comes to running backs, again, is so much more important than it is for wide receivers. The reason it's so much more important is because there is direct history linking back to years and years about running backs who are running under 4.5 40 times that are ranking as top 12 running backs in fantasy football. There's only a couple outliers, guys like Ramondre Stevenson in previous years. Kyron Williams is a major outlier, but all in all, there's usually around 70 to 80% of the running backs that finish inside the top 12 every single year that are running sub 4.5 40 times. So speed is going to determine how likely it is that they have massive upside in fantasy football. Now with Trey Benson, again, he checks the speed metric in a big way. 4.39 40-yard dash time at the NFL Combine. So this is exactly what I'm looking for, especially comparing it with the size. He has that 6 feet tall and over 215 pounds. So this is already a great start when it comes to Trey Benson's dynasty prospect profile. Now, the next thing I'm looking at is going to be very similar to receivers. The NFL draft capital is important because it determines how short or long of a leash a player has at the NFL level. Guys who was a 5th round pick, he could be cut before the NFL season actually starts. You're not cutting a 1st round pick. And Trey Benson was a 3rd rounder. Day 2 pick, which means that in all likelihood, unless something goes very wrong, there's just not a good chance that he gets cut in his first 2 to 3 seasons at the NFL level. So I like the 3rd round draft capital. And the receiving upside, I feel like it's relatively obvious that we should all be looking for at the running back position, especially in today's modern NFL. There's very few running backs who have real upside who are purely carry backs. You have to be a 300 carry monster to be that guy. And there's not many of those guys left at this stage of the NFL. Now, the receiving upside with Breece Hall, you can see the numbers on the screen. 20 receptions, 227 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown in 2023. So that is not great. It's not fantastic, but it's definitely not a bad number when it comes to the receiving profile that he has. I definitely see some receiving upside here with Trey Benson, and it's a guy that easily can hit a home run hit anytime he has the ball in his hands. So hopefully maybe he'll get a little bit more of that with Kyler Murray, but I would not be surprised if he didn't. And then the last thing I'm looking for is what his efficiency numbers were. Now, again, very similar to the target share when I'm discussing wide receivers, I like to just isolate this number down to 2023 because it shows me that theoretically it should be the best year of their college career, and I want to see what their peak was when it comes to their efficiency. And he was efficient, 5.8 yards per carry at 11.4 yards per reception. Those are good metrics here when it comes to efficiency. So when it comes to Trey Benson, obviously, like I said, he checks all the big physical boxes. Size is there, speed is there. He's got the size of 3-down back and speed consistent with top fantasy backs. The problem that I ultimately have with Trey Benson is his production didn't match. And keep in mind, this guy was not going up against SEC level talent. He wasn't even going up against Big Ten talent. His best competition in 2023 was versus LSU, and in that game, largely ineffective. So there was a lot of times where he would just disappear in games sometimes, and that does worry me because at the NFL level, the talent he's playing at the NFL is going to be way stiffer than the talent he played against when he was with Florida State. No season with 1,000 rushing yards, and it's not great. It is not great. Now, looking at 2023 specifically, when it comes to his production, he had over 1,100 yards from scrimmage and over 220 receiving yards as well. And he did have 15 touchdowns. So that's obviously a good thing because he is good at the goal line. And like I said, this is a guy who hits explosive plays. When you watch him in space and when you watch him burst through a hole, it's very reminiscent of watching Breece Hall. He's got the size of Breece and he's got the speed of Breece when he hits open space. This guy is very hard to track down, and that's why he makes good big plays at the college level. Now with Arizona, he's not going to see a full workload in 2024 unless James Conner gets injured. You just look at James Conner and what he did last year, and he still was just too efficient with the work that he was given. James Conner was still a very, very good player in fantasy football last year and a good player for the Arizona Cardinals. So he's still productive and he has 1 year left on his contract. Now, the chances that he has 100 opportunities at the end of the season, I think that's pretty strong. I think there's a good chance that he sees 70 carries and maybe 30 targets in 2024 behind James Conner as kind of a change of pace back. And after James Conner is gone, he's got a great situation with Kyler Murray because Kyler Murray has shown us over the recent history, that guys like Kenyon Drake and guys like James Conner are very efficient with him and are very good at scoring a lot of touchdowns with Kyler Murray. Because Kyler Murray's a runner. You can't stack the box when it comes to getting a running back here. So Trey Benson, he scares me. He does scare me, but I do think the upside is pretty high with Trey Benson. Now let's move on to Jonathon Brooks. Let's run him through the same metrics that I just ran through with Trey Benson. His size is also very, very good. 6 feet tall and 207 pounds he measured at the NFL Combine. And this is potentially a more fluid number than Trey Benson, I think, because Jonathon Brooks is coming off a torn ACL. So his body is still kind of going through some stuff at the time where he was measuring at the Combine. And his speed, of course, we did not get. This is a major problem for me, and I will get into it later in the video. The NFL draft capital is even better than Benson's. Second round guy. This guy was the first running back off the board. You know that Carolina wants him to be their guy. They've had disasters with Miles Sanders, and Chuba Hubbard is leaving next year. Now, the receiving upside with Jonathon Brooks in his only year as a starter, pretty impressive. 25 receptions, 286 receiving yards, and 1 receiving touchdown. Jonathon Brooks can play receiver. He can. So this is a good number that he hit. And his 2023 efficiency was actually better than Trey Benson's. 6.1 yards per carry and 11.4 yards per reception. Now, what the production will indicate right here is that he's a baller. The receiving upside he has and the efficiency that he has, this guy definitely looks like a complete back and an efficient one too. And really the biggest issue I have with it is, like, I wish we saw more of him. Because this guy, in his only year, he looked like an Isaiah Pacheco. That was actually my pro comp for him, was Isaiah Pacheco, because he's such a physical runner who just gets downfield and he just has no issue taking on contact and keep churning his legs for more yardage. So I really liked what I saw from him in his 1 year, but I do have a problem with it. At the same time, I can't really fault him for not being there because Bijan Robinson was taking over the backfield in Texas the past several years. We all know that Bijan Robinson is not only a good NFL player, but was a great college player as well. So I won't really hold his feet to the fire with that one. While Carolina is not an ideal landing spot, if you just look at their overall team, their ownership, I think it's horrible. I think it's a horrible landing spot. We do have to acknowledge some positives here with the Carolina landing spot. Now, Dave Canales is the new head coach over in Carolina. Before that, he spent years developing great wide receivers, and he also, as the offensive coordinator last year, developed Rachaad White into a 3-down back in Tampa Bay. So the history shows us that he's good at developing key pieces on that offense, and he seems to like a 3-down back in his backfield. So when we look at the other Carolina running backs, well, first of all, Miles Sanders is done. They still have him under contract, but they actually have an out after 2024. So we can expect either they trade him this offseason or they just wind up cutting him in 2025. So I don't really worry about Miles Sanders. Now, Chuba Hubbard is on the last year of his deal, and he's actually looked okay with the work that he's gotten with Carolina. So I don't rule out the potential that he could see some work in 2024. But I will say that Jonathan Brooks, by all accounts, appears to be the guy that they intend to move forward with. Now, Bryce Young is also not mobile. This is actually good when it comes to getting checkdowns for running backs. Mobile quarterbacks aren't checking the ball down because they have legs of their own, so they can either choose to run out of the pocket and pick up the first down with their own legs, or they could choose to just buy themselves some time so they can bomb it down the field. Bryce Young is not that mobile. So there's going to be some checkdowns available here for Jonathan Brooks if he is the guy. And if all goes well with all these things, this guy is definitely a 3-down back, potentially on an ascending team. They've got a lot of new weapons. They've got a new coaching staff. It's potential that Carolina is an ascending team. Here's the problem. I like Dave Canales. Dave Canales is not the problem here. You know what is the problem? The ownership. I have said this for a lot this offseason on this channel. There are very few coaches in the NFL history who are good enough to overcome bad ownership. And what I think we're looking at here with David Tepper is he's the new Daniel Snyder. Remember when he was with Washington? That team was a mess for so long, and very few coaches could overcome that to try to get them to the playoffs. Horrible ownership at the NFL level leads to long-standing dysfunction as an NFL franchise. That's hard to overcome when it comes to fantasy football. And bad teams directly link to bad fantasy football running backs. That is a fact. Bottom 5 teams very rarely produce top 20 running backs in fantasy football. So if they can't figure it out, Jonathan Brooks has so much of his work cut out for him just trying to overcome dysfunction at Carolina's franchise. I'm not going to hold the torn ACL against him when it comes to his long-term dynasty value because he's still a very young player. He's not even 21 years old yet, so I don't really hold that against him too much. But what I do have a problem with is we are uncertain about his speed. And all I can do at that point is go based on film. And based on film, this guy is not super fast. I would not be surprised if he was closer to a 4.6 guy than he was a 4.5 guy. I don't think that he's a very fast guy. And so how will he adjust to a physical division with 2 good defenses with, teams like Tampa Bay and with teams like New Orleans? I see positives here, but I definitely have my issues here. So when I'm lining these 2 guys up, Jonathan Brooks, Trey Benson, I can understand why people think that this is a close one. I think that there's plenty of reasons to believe the draft capital's not that far off, and also Trey Benson has a lot of upside, and Jonathan Brooks looks like the more productive guy. I can see why it's close. What's interesting to me is some are clearly in favor of Jonathan Brooks, and I gotta tell you, it's a very easy decision for me. I'm going with Trey Benson. Trey Benson has the better situation. He has more athletic traits than Jonathan Brooks does. I like Jonathan Brooks, but I think he got ultimately screwed by a landing spot that is going to be so hard for him to overcome for serious fantasy football success. Whereas Trey Benson with Kyler Murray has a running quarterback to take pressure off of the middle of that defense, because defenses cannot stack the box against the running quarterbacks. Now, let me know what you think of these two guys in the comments below, and let me know what other breakdowns you want to see on this channel.